I'm Amber Wang, and welcome to Marginalia, where we discuss the impacts of literature and how it can shape our lives. In this episode, I'm joined by a very special guest, Miss Maddie Faber, who I will be discussing The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue with. I published an episode on this book previously in my podcast, so make sure you check it out. Now, without further ado, let's jump to today's episode. Before we get to the questions, I was wondering if you can give our audience a little introduction about yourself.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Maddie. I take she, her pronouns. I am currently based in New York City, and my work has to do with a lot of literary and writing things. So, on one hand, I do marketing and curation for an online bookstore, and I also write myself, and I also teach writing. So, lots of literary endeavors in my life currently, and my kind of start into the book world was actually, fun fact, in high school, my librarians used to give me advanced reader copies of books they got, and I would read through them for them and tell them which ones I think the library should get more copies of, which translated me to doing book reviews in college. I at one time even like had my own like bookstagram during the pandemic, so I've
Oh,
always been like orbiting the book world in really fun ways.
nice. And you said you were working on a book right now yourself?
So I mostly write plays, but I'm trying to work my way back into fiction. So growing up, I always wrote fiction, and then in college, I really fell in love with theater. And so all of my books started becoming plays, but I do want to go back to book writing because,
Mm.
reading novels is like what made me fall in love with reading and being creative and storytelling. So I would love to eventually write a book.
That's really nice though. You can really correlate your love for like theater with writing. And there's a lot of new ways to like explore that, especially through plays too. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. It's really fun, and it's really fun to be like, okay, I have this idea for a story. Is it better if people like see what's happening on the stage, or is it better if they get into the mind of the character? Because I think
Yeah.
that's a question between like whether something should be a book or should be a play.
Yeah. And while I've been reading, I've always been thinking about like author's purpose. Like, what does she mean by this particular thing? And I think we're going to explore that in some of our questions. So let's get started. Um,
Awesome.
our first question is, what's your opinion on the non-linear timeline and its effects on the story's rhythm? And do you think it's a style that many more authors should explore potentially?
So I really loved the non-linear timeline in this book. I think in general with fantasy, there's so much lore and world building that you have to communicate to your reader. And I'm not a big fan of the books that kind of just dump it all you on you at the beginning and you're kind of like reading through like, chapters and chapters of like the lore of this world and how the rules work. And I
Yeah.
think as a writer, you just have to kind of like trust your readers to like pick it up as they go. And I think the nonlinear timeline like really works for that because it lets you kind of flip back and forth between like modern day, I think it was like 1700s France, and
Yeah.
like really see get these little bits and pieces about how this world works and how Addie's world works without it feeling like just a deluge of information at the beginning that you're like, I won't remember any of this.
That same. I think like as the book progressed, I started to pick up more details about each of their respective worlds,
Mhm.
and it was really fascinating to learn as I read along the way instead of just like dwelling on all the information that she would toss at us in the beginning. Yeah.
Especially it's like you have 300 years of a character's life to go through.
Hmm.
Like that's a lot.
Yeah.
And so like I don't think every book lends itself to like a nonlinear storyline. Like I don't think you should do nonlinear just to do nonlinear. But I this book like really had a purpose for it and did it really well. And so it's like I would love to read more books that have that kind of like I'm doing nonlinear because like this is how it functions in the story rather than like I'm doing nonlinear just
Just
because why
yeah. Uh-huh.
not?
I totally agree. I think this story is very suitable for it because, I mean, she's lived for at least 300 years, and the author V. Schwab chooses to focus on this during this current time of her life. So it's irrelevant. Like her past was irrelevant, so that's why the time skipped and everything. But the nonlinear timeline, it gradually passed to the present. I think it was like 300 years and then it progressed to like 200 or even like less than that, but it was a span and we got to learn more about her and her life that way too. So that was really nice of her to incorporate that. Our second question is, what would you say is the central message of this book? Or what is its theme, basically?
I think the thing that I remember about this book most, because for context, I read this back when it came out, and wrote a review on it. And it's been a while since I've like thought about this story. But when I was thinking back on it, like to prepare for the interview and like kind of skimming in some chapters again and stuff, I think the thing that really sticks out to me is this idea of like there's so many different ways to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think especially God, I'm gonna sound like such a grandma when I say this, but like in like kind of like this age of like a lot of things are like who do you know? Who knows what you do? More so of like who is aware of your existence? And I think just really like celebrating the small ways we make impacts on each other's lives that we like may never know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of it especially like as a writer too, because I look at my own work and I see like the fingerprints of the people I love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that for me was such a special detail of like that's how Addie makes her mark in the world is like influencing these artists and poets and musicians and writers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think just like seeing it on both sides, I love those um, stories of like, oh, this song is inspired by so and so, but just like seeing those little touches of the people who mattered to the artist.
Mm-hmm.
And in Addie's way, it's not that the artists remember her specifically because that's the point of the curse. But I think just finding purpose in smaller ways you're able to make an impact on others, to me,
Mm-hmm.
felt like the most memorable thing that
Yeah.
I walked away from with this
Yeah.
book.
Similarly, I thought about it as leaving your own mark in the world too,
Mm,
because through whatever Addie's doing, even though she's forgotten by other people, she often appears in a lot of artists' like their backgrounds in their drawings, like V. Schwab mentioned, and it's those tiny little marks and signs that signal to your existence in this world, even though other people can't remember you, for example. And I think it's a really powerful message just because, like, as a teenager, I still have so many things in life to accomplish. And it kind of shows me, like, the potential that I can be in this world and what a difference, like, I can be as well. So I think it's really inspiring too.
I love that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the little like appearing in the backgrounds of people's photos, I love that. So fun
Mhm.
fact, when I was in college, I was like a tour guide. And there'd be so many times where so I was a tour guide at Harvard, and so like a lot of people taking the tour are not necessarily like prospective students, they're just people who are interested in like the history. And so there's like a big mix, and sometimes there's very like young children on the tour.
Mhm.
And like a lot of the families would have me like take photos with their kids, which was like super cute. But sometimes I think about the fact of like, I gave tours to hundreds of people. I was a tour guide all 4 years. I loved doing it, so I did it as much as I could. And it's just like, am I just like in a family photo album somewhere, like with someone's kid? Am I just like going to be a face that they see in pictures and like, have no concept of who I am? Like, and it's really fun to think about that and just like of like I'm like such a secondary character in your narrative, but I'm
But
there, I'm on your
yeah,
wall or I'm in the photo album.
like I don't even know you, but I'm in your life at one point. So
Mm.
there was a sign of that. Maybe when they flip back to this photo in like 10 years, they'll see that, oh, like who is this girl?
Yeah, oh, we took a tour over there. We seem cool, whatever. So
Yeah, I'm like a tour guide at my school too, because we're a private school. So we
mm,
have this program called Student Ambassadors, basically where we host prospective families, and I love doing it, even though it's like my school is rather small. But like imagine giving a tour at Harvard. Like how long would that have to be? Like,
it takes a while
yeah.
and it's fun. We had like different tours too. Like we had like a specific admissions tour. So it's like if someone is interested in like going there, then we
Uh-huh.
talk more about the classes. It was just kind of like a tourist. We talk more about the history. I wrote a women's history tour while I was there, and so we did that too for people interested in that. So it's like, but there's like a lot to sort through.
Probably a lot to memorize too about like building names and stuff.
Listen,
Okay.
if there's ever like a trivia bracket on it, like
Oh,
I would have it for years and years and years. Like that's locked in my
yeah.
brain.
That's knowledge you can take for the rest of your life.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. All right, moving on. I know that you studied folklore and mythology during college. So, what's your opinion on how V. Schwab's, like, how she balances the fantasy elements of the story with its more like grounded and relatable themes?
Mm. I really love these kind of fantasies that at least have a foot in the modern day because I think that makes the fantasy much more accessible. Of you can read this book and be like, maybe I saw Addie and I wouldn't know.
Hmm.
Um, and I think just having these really I mean, I feel like if you were like a reader as a kid, you grew up reading like the epic fantasies with like dragons and princesses and all these characters that feel like very out of reach to you, of
Hmm.
like, whoa, that's super cool, but that's like so far off from the way my life is. And I love this book because it's just like a lot of the characters, I mean, obviously, Luke aside, Abby aside, like a lot of them are like everyday people. Like
Hmm.
she meets the main guy in a bookstore and he's just like a bookstore worker, Henry, and it's just I think it really like grounds the story and makes you feel a closer proximity to it. And I think like with your point of like kind of connecting it to like folklore and mythology, the most powerful stories like in folklore and mythology are the ones that you feel closest to, that you can find like some resonance in. Um, Whether that's like kind of an explicit resonance of like, oh, this is taking place in like present day New York City, which for me is where I live, right? So
Hmm.
when I read the book, I'm like, I know like where they're talking about, like
Uh-huh.
street all the time. I know what that is. Um, or you're kind of like making the spot for yourself in the story. Um, like those are the stories we remember most. Um, and yeah, I think just V. Schwab does like a really beautiful job. I mean, she has so many books. And I feel like she does such a range of fantasy books. Like I
Hmm.
think, oh, what was her most recent one? Of like she was doing like a vampire novel or something.
Uh-huh.
A little out of the like what she's up to. Um, but yeah, it's just like the kind of like accessibility of it, of like this could be happening in my backyard,
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
think makes it closer. It makes you think like, oh, what would happen if this like I saw this happening outside?
Yeah, exactly. I think how relatable this book is might not like categorize it as a fantasy because
Mhm.
it's normal people without mostly without magical powers as compared to the real fantasy books where they all have powers and magic. And I think as like a New York resident for you, you can relate to like the emotions and the reality of walking in those streets. And I think rather than a myth and fantasy, I would personally categorize this book as more of a fiction instead.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
could definitely see like the fantastical elements of it too.
Right. Yeah. And I think those are my favorite. Like I just love when like a touch is like
Yeah,
strange or out of the ordinary, but otherwise you're kind of like, this could happen, you know?
exactly. Yeah. All right. Next, what does Addie's desire to leave a lasting impact on the world say about the human need for recognition and purpose?
I think it's a very human thing to want to like matter to
Hmm.
other people
For
and
sure.
like matter in like a monumental way. Everyone like, um, I think when you talk to kids, like you always hear like the very big dreams, like the very like I want to be president, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be like big and visible and have people remember me.
Hmm.
And so I think it's just like such a human thing. Like very few people are like, I want to be a bookstore worker, or
Yeah.
these kind of like I say quote unquote because it's like I don't believe they're insignificant, but when you're kind of making your way in the world, it can feel like some things are more significant than others. And yeah, I think like especially for me, I thought about this book in I think like the context of where I went to college because I read it in college for my college newspaper. And like I was around people who like wanted these big significant jobs,
Hmm.
especially like right out of college, who immediately want to go work in politics or go start a nonprofit or like do all these incredible, amazing things. Um, and I think just like coming to terms with the fact of like you can have impact in like so many smaller ways that you
Hmm.
don't have to like go invent the cure to cancer in order to matter to someone
Yeah.
and like in order to be remembered to someone. Because it's like, if just one person like remembers you, that's being remembered. And I think like that's like what Addie has to realize is like that is worth so much of like just the memory of one person. And like it kind of the book really emphasized like the value of like all it takes to be remembered is like to have one person remember
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yeah, and this kind of relates to our earlier discussion on leaving a mark. Like, she has left plenty of marks in the society, in the world. And even though she realizes this like 100 years in the future, I feel like she doesn't really appreciate it just because she knows that she's not really remembered.
Right.
But leaving a legacy is enough by itself because there are people who are remembered but didn't really leave a lasting legacy. So there's definitely
Mhm.
two sides to this story. And I think Addie fulfills one side, but she has yet to see the other side.
Right. No, totally.
Yeah. Next question. What have you discovered through this book that contributes to how you view the world?
Mm. I think this book made me think a lot about kind of the butterfly effect, especially in like how she kind of appears in the backgrounds of like photos and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, have you heard of the butterfly effect? Is this like a familiar?
I have heard about it, but do you mind explaining it a little?
Just in case any readers are not aware. I forget what movie it's based off of, but it's basically this movie where I'm like gonna botch it, and like someone who actually knows like the full movie is like gonna get on me. But the basic premise is like these people travel back in time and like step on a butterfly, you know, and
Hmm.
when they come back into the present day, the whole timeline is completely messed up because like it was just like a chain reaction that all came from like accidentally killing a butterfly or something.
Hmm.
And so it's just this idea that these like very small, like minuscule actions have these ripple effects that we like aren't even aware of. Um, and I think the book made me feel a lot about that, or think a lot about that in a strange way, because it's like, especially for Addie, like as you were saying, of like she's like really struggling with like she's making this mark, but she like isn't remembered.
Hmm.
But it's kind of like who knows like what seeing her face in the background of these photos or these paintings or like the people who experienced like the art that was somehow influenced by her or that she appeared in, like who knows like what kind of ripple effects that had. um and I think like also just in the end of the book when Henry like publishes his book about Addie,
Hmm.
um it's like who's to say of like the ripple effects that book has on the people who read it. um and also just I'm sure the impact that she's had on Henry's life,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
um and so yeah, I think I definitely like train wrecked around your question, but I hope it got to something there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get it. Like one single action can totally affect the whole storyline and potentially not only like one person's life, but a group of people's lives who you've interacted with. So whatever you
Mhm.
do is significant, even though like even if you might not know it. That's what we're trying to say here. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And our next question is, what is the most memorable scene in the book for you?
Mm,
There's a lot to choose from.
there's a lot to choose from. Um,
We can narrow it down to maybe a favorite character.
Maybe your favorite. I think, I mean, honestly, I really loved the scene where Addie is like praying for her freedom
In the
and
beginning.
like the scene where she kind of like makes the deal with Luke. Like, I think that's just like, I feel like sometimes I have a tendency to like judge characters and be like, how silly, you made a deal with the devil. Because sometimes I feel like, and that's not necessarily the fault of the characters. Like I say this as a writer. Like as a writer, it's a job, our job to like make the stakes for this character like super apparent for the reader. To be like, know what this person is giving up, like know why they are so desperate, right?
Mhm.
And I think just like this idea of being also for context, my um most of my undergraduate stuff was like around feminist literature and feminist mythology.
Mhm.
So it was like really powerful for me that she's like trying to escape a forced marriage. Like to me, that was like such a clear reason for like being willing to do whatever to get out of being stuck.
Mhm.
And I just remember like the like sensory images of that scene are so vivid that I just like loved reading it, even though I was like, ah, the devil never go no, but like it was like it just was such a scene because it's like for me at least I was like, no, I understand. Like if I was in her spot, like I wouldn't care like what the devil had what the downfall of the that would be. Like I would say yes.
Mhm.
And I think it really spoke to like V. Schwab's talent as a writer that she was able to like create a scene where you're like, no, I understand it.
Yeah.
Like I get exactly why the character is doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Like her desperate emotions really speaks to you through the book, through like the pages, because you feel it like in her shoes that and when I was reading it, I felt like V. Schwab inserted so much imagery and visual descriptions that like this world that she built was really well crafted, despite the continuity of it throughout the book. Like I was able to like understand it quite
Mm-hmm.
well and flow along with it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. All right. Our next question is, there were many mentions of the wooden ring that Look gave Addie. How does it symbolize Addie's fight for freedom, despite the fact that it's given from Look, who's her jailer?
It's such a good because there's that weird, or at least when I was reading it, it was like that thing where it's like, can does Luke have like feelings? Like, can Luke have feelings
Exactly.
for Addie?
Exactly. Yeah.
And like, and I think just like the fact that it's like a ring, like for me, obviously my mind was like wedding ring because they're she's running
Like,
from marriage.
mhm,
And it's just like you've given up one ring, you've escaped one ring, and now you have this other one. That
mhm.
is like it's like you give something up either way.
Yeah.
Which I think just is like a really well done predicament that Addie finds herself in.
Mhm.
Um, and I think just like I don't know, I'm a big person of like physical reminders of things. Like I know like Luke is all like, I don't deal in trinkets, but I deal in a lot of trinkets. I have so many trinkets. I love a trinket. And I think just like for me it's such a powerful symbol of like having a physical reminder of like the curse. Like you can never escape. Like even if like because I think especially living in somewhere like New York, it's very easy to like never be recognized. Like it's one of the things or like to have feel like no one's noticing you. And it's
Mhm.
like in a strange way, one of the things like I love about New York. Like it's really nice to feel like I can pass through the city just like as an NPC almost, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
very fun.
Mhm.
Um, and but it doesn't even if like there is some joy and freedom in that feeling of like not feeling judged, not feeling like you're being remembered, it Addie can never escape because she has this like physical premonition. It's like
Yeah.
it never allows her to get lost in like the benefit of the kind of benefit of her curse.
Yeah. Totally. She's bounded by not only what the ring symbolizes, but also the physicality of it.
Hmm.
I think it's super, I think it's such a complex symbolism of the ring. Like it has so many different interpretations, but it all touches on one thing, which is a restriction for Addie's freedom. And
Hmm.
that's like a reason to why the story is so complicated in like so many different ways. And I love it. Next question is, do you see the struggle for independence in this book apparent in contemporary challenges?
I do. And I think there's a real struggle to like I mean we've been kind of like talking about it as a through line, but there's a real struggle to like feel like you're actually carving your own path,
Hmm.
like away from everything, whether that be like relationships, whether that be family, whether that be like just like crushing weight of being alive, like, no matter what, like I think everyone has like something they're fighting against.
Hmm.
Like everyone has a Luke, whether it is like a person who is their Luke in a way, or whether it's more of a like internal thing where you're the one holding yourself back.
Hmm.
Um, and so, and I think especially again in this thread of like fighting to make your mark on the world and like carve your own path.
Hmm.
I don't know. I think there's just like many there's so many people and it's so hard to like be like this is who I am, this is who I am, free from all expectations, this is who I am, like free from all everything. So for me, like this is like a strange piece of advice. I work with when I'm working with students on writing, I most often am working with them on like college essays.
Hmm.
Um which is like a really hard thing to do. It's a hard way. First of all, they never teach you personal writing usually in high school, and then you suddenly have to write a personal statement, and it's kind of like, what do I do?
Uh-huh.
Oh, and all my students are stressed. They're like, how do I like kind of like make my mark and like show that I'm like this like independent, thoughtful like person, and how do I like show who I am outside of like the confines of my community, you know?
Hmm.
And that I always tell them is just, okay, like, what if I tell you that every idea has already been taken? Because it has. Like if someone's reading 40,000 applications, like they're going to see everything. They're going to see the athlete, they're going to see the artist, like they're going to see everything. And so trying to pick like a completely original path, impossible.
Hmm.
What matters is like how you do it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Um, and I think that in a very roundabout way, it like reminds me a lot of like the Addie um is like she's so determined to make a mark in the world, like she's going to find a way. And it's just like it's just how she does it that is like really thoughtful and inspiring.
Hmm.
And to finding that personal connection with Henry. Um, but yeah, I went on a very long tangent there. But yeah. It's like, I don't know. I think of
I
independence
totally
as
get
like not just like from people or from a Luke, but like it's also like from expectations, from like the things you have to do in order to get where you want.
it. Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think about that a lot.
No, I totally agree. Like it's not only about the decisions that you make, but rather like because everyone ultimately has similar choices and decisions. So I feel like what's important is the journey that you take to pursue it. And your anecdote really felt personal to me because I'm a junior right now. So I'll be
Mm.
applying to college like this summer. And as you know, I'm really scared as well. But I mean, I totally get it. Like everyone, I've seen it on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere. Like people all have their own college essay ideas, but they're all kind of along the same storyline. So it's really hard to find one that suits you and expand on it.
Right. Right. And like a lot of people feel like very trapped by this idea of like I have to be like the most original, creative, intelligent person to ever exist. And it's like, no, you have to find like yourself, like your way of making a mark.
Hmm.
And like do that. Do your thing instead of like feeling like you have to like do this like very specific path forward. This very specific path of like leaving a legacy, making a mark, whatever,
Mhm.
and like
Yeah.
really finding your own independence from that. And like then that's how you figure out like who you are. And that's like, similar to what Addie does. It's like she figures out who she is once she figures out that it's like she can make an impact in like her own way and find freedom in her own way.
Yeah. I think I really needed to hear that, but that's a really good message to a lot of other teenagers who are facing similar anxiousness and stress.
No, good luck, Godspeed. I do not miss applying for college. I'm just happy that I can help students.
Yeah. All right. Our final question, what rating would you give this book and why?
Okay, I give it a 4.5 out of 5.
Mm,
Um, I think whenever I read books, reading books is so like at least for me, it was like really hard because it's like my approach to rating things is not like I'm gonna rate it against every other book I've ever read. It's like I want to be really careful to be like, what is the author's intent? What is the genre they're working in? Like, I'm not gonna compare like a rom-com to like a like serious piece of like crime thriller, you know? Like they exist on different scales. It's not super helpful for me to be like, well, this one had better character development, you
yeah.
know?
Hmm.
And so when I was rating Addie LaRue, I think the things that came into consideration for me were like one, I really liked the balance of like kind of present day and also taking us back into the past. Two, I think it was like I really love the themes of the book, as we've talked about them a lot, and they're fun to talk about. I
Yeah,
think there's this book. I think a mark of a good book is that it opens up room for conversation.
definitely.
Like, if everyone kind of like closes the book and is like, okay, we all got the same thing, the same like one liner about like peace on earth.
Hmm.
We're done. Like then it's like, I don't want books that like tell me what to think. I want books that like give me a lot of things to think about and make my own choices on.
Exactly.
The only part of the book that I wanted more from, I'll say, is that some of the side characters felt a little two-dimensional to me. And it's like the kind of the mix as a writer of like sometimes you need side characters to move the plot along, and that's why you create them.
Hmm.
But I think in side characters, I'm interested in like, okay, you added them because you needed to move the plot along or something to happen, but I want them to be like a little more evolved from that. Like they can start there and that can be like why you initially add them to the story, but it's like I have a lot of yeah, I don't know. It's just like everyone's such a like passing through a busy city. Everyone has their own story. Everyone has like their own fully fleshed like wants, needs, fears, hopes, dreams. And I just wish I had kind of like seen a little bit more of that three-dimensionality even in these side characters. But
Yeah.
it's like really beautifully done. I love the three main characters. I love so much about the book. And so like it's truly just like me being nitpicky because I read books for a living.
No, but I totally agree. Like the characters, they had so much potential because they were probably the most relatable characters to like people in the world, people in New York City. And I felt like in such a complicated story, they could have served more of a purpose too. And the author could have expanded more on how these characters interacted with the main characters and with the flow of the story, the themes, the whole storyline. So yeah, I totally agree. That's actually one of my takeaways too about this book. And I give
Mm,
it the same rating as well because I just felt like it was missing some kind of thing, but overall it was fantastic.
yeah, definitely. Back when I read it, it was like one of my top books of the year. And it was like as you can like see behind me, I have a very
Oh,
big bookshelf. I get like sent books for work all the time. Like that's just part of the gig.
uh-huh.
And so when I like read something, like I only keep it if I really, really loved it. And it's like Addie LaRue is like one of the books I've like held on to over the past few years, even as I've like moved apartments and stuff. And so it's like it's up there for me.
Yeah, I like how you color coded them. It looks really good.
I love it. I started doing it in college, and I was like, this is great because it's easy to organize, you know. It's like if I take a book off, I like immediately know where to put it back.
Hmm.
It's great. Would recommend.
All right, that is the end of our interview.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, and thank you for joining me on this episode of Marginalia. And until next time, happy reading.